The carriage rolled beneath sunlit trees, birds flitting between branches as the steady clip-clop of hooves echoed through the forest. Inside, the mood was far from peaceful. "You absolutely cannot make a scene this time, Alice, do you understand?" Chloe Verdier sat perfectly composed, hands resting on her cane, her voice calm but unyielding. Alice frowned. But the last soirée was unbearably dull. "I couldn't help it." She waved it off lightly. "And how was I supposed to know a few glasses of sherry would get me so tipsy? Anyhow, I'm sure this one will be much livelier, especially with you there." Chloe smiled, serene and controlled. "You really must behave yourself this time. This ball is hosted by none other than Duke Thisse," she said. "You must find yourself a potential suitor." Alice lowered her eyes. "I know. I'm well aware that my betrothal is the only thing that can save our family from drowning in debt." Her voice softened, almost wistful. "Still, I've always hoped to meet someone who would truly sweep me off my feet." Silence followed. Chloe's fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. "I'm sorry, Alice. If only my leg weren't in such a state." Regret flickered across her calm expression. "I wish I didn't have to place such a heavy burden on my younger sister. This is all my—" Before she could finish, Alice suddenly stood, crossing the carriage in a single step. "Chloe." She wrapped her arms around her sister without hesitation. "What could you possibly have to feel sorry for?" Alice held her tighter, voice firm despite the smile. "If anyone is to blame, it's our father. Loving mother so much that he spent his entire fortune on her medical bills. And completely failed to manage the estate." Alice's voice sharpened as memories surfaced. "Think of what happened 3 years ago," she said bitterly. "Despite our family's precarious situation, father allowed Duke Thisse's army to use our castle." Chloe stiffened, startled. "He may be our father," Alice went on, "but I can't tell if he has a heart of gold, or if he's simply a fool." "Have you heard the rumors about Duke Thisse?" Alice said coldly. "None of them are good." The words grew darker as the rumors followed. Stories whispered in shadows, of illegitimate children born to mistresses, only to be secretly executed, of a man with a cruel temper, one who could destroy anyone who crossed him, regardless of rank. Some even claimed it would have been better if he'd died on the battlefield. "If you get on his bad side," Alice warned, "he'll ruin you completely." Chloe turned to her. "Alice, considering our family's standing, we're lucky to have even been invited to this event. Still, he's not the kind of person we should associate with," Alice said with worry, then sighed, waving it off. "I just hope we don't run into him while we're enjoying the festivities." Chloe didn't answer, but the unease in her eyes said enough. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. "You cannot allow yourself to be afraid, Chloe," she told herself, forcing her breathing to steady. 3 years earlier, at Verdier estate, Viscount Verdier, the lord of a small castle, had opened his gates without hesitation. As the imperial army retreated from battle, the Verdier estate became their refuge. Chloe stepped carefully across the courtyard. Whispers followed her like shadows. "So, it's true. Viscount Verdier's eldest daughter is a cripple. In that state, how could she attend to anyone? Won't she just be in the way?" Each word struck sharper than the cold. Chloe lowered her gaze, pretending not to hear, and continued treating the injured. "Leave her be," someone muttered at last. "The cripple just wants to help." "Yeah, I've no complaints. She's a right feast for the eyes at least," another answered, and from not far behind Chloe, her father heard every single word. Later that night, Chloe stood at the doorway when the message was delivered. "His lordship has requested you leave the wounded in the care of the servants." Chloe paused, then bowed her head. "I understand." She sat on the edge of her bed, cane resting against her knee. "Did I cause father to worry?" A soft sigh escaped her lips. Still, her eyes lifted slowly, resolve returning in quiet measure. "Imagine the pain they're experiencing," she thought. "No wonder they're on edge." Just then, "Attention!" The sudden shout cut through the night. Chloe flinched, fingers tightening against the window frame. Footsteps followed, firm, measured. "Greet your commander!" Outside, the soldiers snapped into formation in perfect unison, boots crunching against the snow as they saluted. Chloe's breath caught. "That's the commander?" Her eyes followed the tall figure who stepped forward, broad-shouldered, clad in a dark uniform trimmed with gold. Then he spoke. "Earlier today, I received news of my father, Wilhelm von Thisse's passing. The air grew heavy. He was beheaded by the enemy," the commander continued evenly, "who chose to display his head upon their castle walls." Then he turned to one of the soldiers. "You," he said calmly, "do you wish to return home?" The man hesitated, then answered, "Yes, sir. My wife recently gave birth to our child. I wish for nothing more than to see them." The commander nodded and turned to another. "And you?" The second soldier hesitated as well before replying that he had a sick mother waiting for him at home, one he worried for deeply. One after another, the soldiers spoke, each giving their reason to return home. From above, Chloe heard them all, finally understanding the weight of their worries. Below, the commander continued, "As you can see, we have countless reasons to end this war and return home. I share that same goal." His voice lowered. I have not even been able to recover my father's body and hold a funeral to lay him to rest. So I will do everything in my power to lead my soldiers to victory. After all, this is a matter of House Thisse's pride and dignity. Damien Ernst von Thisse, commander of the army, paused before adding firmly, So now, let us turn all the desperation and longing we just felt into action. The soldiers' morale surged as they raised their hands in agreement. From above, Chloe's heart nearly skipped a beat. In a single moment, he had lifted the spirits of his men, far greater than the rumors claimed. Below, Damien stood as the soldiers shouted the name Thisse with pride. Then suddenly he glanced toward the window where Chloe was standing. Their eyes met. Chloe flinched, startled. She slipped down to the floor, covering her mouth. Were their eyes really locked just now? She wondered. After a moment, she peeked through the window again, only to see that the man had already turned away with his soldiers. She let out a heavy sigh. Remembering his words, she thought how she herself would never be able to stand like that after hearing of her father's passing. Clasping her hands together, she prayed softly, Please, allow those soldiers to return home so they can meet their loved ones. Below, the man who had turned away earlier paused. Slowly, he looked back toward the window, his fierce gaze piercing through the glass, as if searching for the woman he had seen only moments ago. The next morning, Chloe peeked outside her room. Seeing no one in the quiet dawn, she decided to hurry out and return before everyone woke, hoping to gather some herbs from the woods. Just as she was about to leave, a voice called out, Lady Chloe! She flinched at the sound of her name, then slowly relaxed when she saw it was Gilles. Where are you headed so early in the morning? He asked politely. Didn't his lordship ask you to stay in your room? I'm just going to gather some herbs from the forest, she replied. I can do that for you, Gilles offered quickly. And what if you pick the wrong ones again, like before? Chloe teased with a small laugh. Gilles flushed in embarrassment. But still, it's too cold outside, lady. Chloe, he said with concern. Smiling reassuringly, Chloe shook her head. You don't have to worry. I've gone on my own plenty of times. I'll be fine. Seeing her determination, Gilles could only nod. My lady, please be careful. Chloe waved goodbye and left while Gilles stood there watching her go, worry still lingering in his eyes. Inside the woods, Chloe carefully gathered herbs. Everyone else was working hard, so she felt she should make herself useful as well. As she thought that, a faint rustling of leaves caught her attention. Her gaze followed the sound, and she froze. A man stood by the riverbank in the early morning light. He was no ordinary man. It was Duke Thisse, the same man she had seen the night before. What was he doing here? This was a place only she knew. Her instincts told her not to disturb him. She decided to leave as quietly as possible. But in her haste, her cane pressed down on a dried leaf. The man turned sharply. Who's there? He demanded. What is your name? Chloe hesitated, then stepped forward. My apologies, Your Grace. I am Chloe Verdier, eldest daughter of Viscount Verdier. He strode toward her and stopped directly in front of her, his gaze fixed on her as if assessing something. After a moment, he spoke coldly. I've been noticing a pattern since last night. Chloe flinched. It seems Lord Verdier's eldest daughter has a habit of spying on others. Like a rat. She let out a slow breath and bowed slightly. I apologize if I've offended you, Your Grace. I swear on my name that I had no such intention just now. Oh? He raised a brow. So you did yesterday? Then, with an arrogant edge, he asked, Did your father order you to seduce me? Chloe froze, utterly stunned by his words. Damien continued coolly. So Lord Verdier isn't as naive as he looks. What an ambitious fellow. Lowering her head, Chloe replied firmly, That is not the case, I assure you. Really? He smirked. Then why were you making a show of treating my soldiers? Wounds? His gaze dropped to her foot. House Verdier may be of low standing, but such work is hardly fitting for a noblewoman, especially one of your condition. Chloe clenched her skirt tightly, her grip tightening around her cane. Is this truly the same man I saw yesterday? Meeting his gaze with dignity, she replied, I was only helping them so they could return to their families sooner. I fail to see how my title makes that wrong. She straightened. Besides, my late mother taught me that it is a noble's duty to aid those in need. That is the conduct expected of nobility. The man laughed softly. The comportment of nobility, you say? He stepped closer and leaned in. Chloe Verdier. Has it never occurred to you that trying to help beyond your abilities is not only selfish, but also a nuisance to others? His gaze sharpened. If you had heard the filthy jokes they made, would you still be able to hold your head high and speak of noble conduct? He paused, voice lowering. And imagine if Viscount Verdier had overheard them. How do you think he would have felt? His hand lifted, brushing through Chloe's hair. If I were him, I would have severed the heads of those who dared sully my daughter's name. Chloe stiffened. Those soldiers, he continued evenly, have watched dozens of comrades slaughtered in battle. Do you know what that does to a man? His eyes narrowed. And what's more, you're wandering through the forest early this morning with that leg of yours. If something were to happen to you, who would be to blame, my lady? Chloe turned her face away, avoiding his gaze. This land has belonged to House Verdier for generations. No one can enter without permission. It's safe. she argued. Damien smirked. Safe, you say? Before she could react, he seized her cane. Would you still babble such nonsense if I did this? What are you doing? Chloe cried, reaching for it. In a swift motion, Damien turned and drove the cane straight through a snake's body, killing it. Instantly, there is always danger lurking in the forest, my lady, he said calmly, so don't be reckless. He straightened and handed the cane back. It's damaged, but you should still be able to make it back to the castle. No, thank you, Chloe replied politely. Damien laughed lightly. I see you have a bit of a temper. That's unexpected. He crouched and reached toward her foot. Let me examine your leg. Is it hereditary? Chloe frowned sharply and pulled back. Why must you be so rude? She snapped. He sighed, rising to his feet. You're too sensitive. I merely asked a question, yet you mistook it for an attack. Then, calmly, allowing your emotions to prevail will only lead to defeat, Lady Chloe. She lifted her chin. I am not a soldier, Your Grace. I do not fight wars. Well, Damien replied. Life itself is a war, especially for someone like you. Chloe frowned. He truly was a devil. She had been completely wrong about him. Clenching her skirt, she spoke firmly. Your Grace, there are two things I wish to say. First, regarding the cane you damaged, I would like a replacement. Damien smiled. No problem. I'll speak to the woodmaker as soon as I return to the barracks. No, Chloe interrupted. She met his eyes. I want a cane made from the birch trees that grow on this estate. Damien's brow furrowed. It was an unusual request. Chloe continued, I heard yesterday that you intend to return victorious from this war. Damien smiled and slowly raised his hand, playing with her hair. My lady, what if I were to give you something even better? She looked at him carefully, searching for his intent. It seems your father definitely wants something more, he added coolly. Chloe understood at once. She pushed his hand away. And that brings me to my second point, she spoke steadily. If my father has ever praised his daughters in front of you, it was purely out of fatherly love. Though he adores us, he is not a fool who would forget that House Verdier stands far below House this in rank, she continued without wavering. You are not the only one who would prefer not to be involved with an impaired woman. The same is true of all men. I am well aware of that. Damien frowned. Why not save such self-disparagement for your journal, he advised. No, Chloe replied, turning away. There is no disparagement in truth, she said as she began to limp forward. And I would like to make one thing clear. Though you are free to pity me, you have no right to assume I am unhappy, or that my life is a war. Behind her, Damien spoke again. Does that mean you're happy living as you are? If you believe that, then your life will never change. Chloe paused. After a moment, she turned back to face him. Yes, I am. Her voice was steady. Living a peaceful, unchanging life on the land where I was born for the rest of my days, that is happiness to me. After that, Chloe Verdier did not remember how she made it back after her encounter with him. All she recalled was how the cold of that early morning wrapped around her entire day like a snake. When she finally awoke, the man had already left with his soldiers. After that, a long time passed before she ever returned to the forest again. And now, 3 years later, Chloe Verdier arrived at Castle Rose of House Thisse with her sister. The castle was as extravagant as the rumors claimed. Built solely for the Duke's entertainment, it was meant to be used for only a single season. Chloe and Alice sat at a side table, quietly taking in the beauty of the castle, when a young man approached. You've arrived, Lady Alice, he said in greeting. He bent slightly and offered his hand. May I ask you for the next dance? Alice accepted with a smile and introduced Chloe to him. The man bowed respectfully, and Chloe returned the gesture. Feeling obliged, he seemed about to ask Chloe as well, but his eyes fell on the cane in her hand, and he hesitated. Sensing his awkwardness, Chloe smiled gently. Watching people dance beautifully is a joy in itself, she said softly. Though I do appreciate the thought. It was her way of preserving her dignity. Lord Cormier led Alice to the dance floor, and the music began. Sitting aside, Chloe felt a quiet sense of relief. It seemed everyone had finally forgotten the scene Alice had caused at the last ball. Count Cormier appeared to be a fine match for her sister. There was nothing negative said about him anywhere, and Chloe found herself glad. She even considered thanking Duke Thisse for the invitation. Though, after how their first meeting had gone, it would have been better to avoid him altogether. Still, it wouldn't be proper. And besides, why had he invited them at all? Was it because their father had helped him and his army 3 years ago? Yet he hadn't seemed like a man who appreciated another's kindness. Chloe could only hope that if she did run into him, he might have already forgotten her. Lost in thought, she was startled by whispers. Look, the Duke has arrived. Her heart sank. When she looked up, she realized the man was already standing in front of her. So he remembered her. With a quiet sigh, Chloe rose and stepped forward. Greetings, Your Grace, she said, bowing. Damien smiled faintly. It's been a while, Lady Chloe Verdier. I am indebted to your father and wish to thank him in person, but I have been quite busy, he continued. So thank you for accepting my invitation. He inclined his head slightly. Then his gaze fell to the cane she was holding. Without hesitation, he raised his hand. "If it is not too much to ask, may I have this dance?" Chloe stared at him, utterly confused. What did this man think he was doing? Whispers immediately filled the room. Did he not see her cane? One murmured. Lady Verdier must have done something to antagonize House this, another whispered. Chloe, who had been standing quietly and listening, finally spoke. "My sincere apologies, Your Grace, but I'm afraid I'm not proficient enough to be your dance partner." The man she had met years ago hadn't changed one bit. Damien stepped closer. "Are you turning me down because others have already asked you, and I might have to wait?" he asked lightly. "If so, I hope you aren't rejecting me. I would very much like a dance with you." He smiled as he spoke, yet every word made Chloe uncomfortable. "Are you tormenting an innocent young woman again, Damien?" A voice cut through the tension. "Can't you see the poor girl is about to break into tears?" It was Johannes, the first prince of the kingdom of Swanton. He stepped closer, his tone sharp. "She's already declined your invitation. It's hardly gentlemanly to continue harassing her. Did you forget your manners after spending time on the battlefield?" Damien glanced at him coolly. "Asking a beautiful woman to dance is not something I would consider poor etiquette." He then looked back at the woman in front of him, "And I'm sure she isn't the type to cry easily." Johannes sighed and turned to Chloe. "I apologize on behalf of my cousin." Chloe met his gaze calmly. "Your Highness, there's no need to apologize. His Grace was merely being considerate, thinking I might end up a wallflower due to my condition." Johannes studied her with interest. "What a clever young lady," he said. "What is your name?" "I am Chloe Verdier, the eldest daughter of House Verdier," she introduced herself. Damien stood silently beside them, watching the exchange. House Verdier," Johannes said. "I would very much like to meet your father someday, the man who raised such a beautiful daughter to be so bold." He patted Chloe's shoulder lightly. Damien's brow furrowed at the sight. Chloe bowed deeply. "My apologies, Your Highness, but I am here today with my younger sister, not my father." As she finished speaking, she suddenly realized something. Alice, she scanned the ballroom, but her sister was nowhere to be seen. "Is that so?" Johannes replied. "Then introduce her to me later." With that, he departed. Damien watched Chloe carefully, understanding at once why she looked flustered. He leaned closer. "Where is your sister, Lady Chloe?" "She was just here," Chloe said anxiously. "I can't see her anywhere. Please allow me to look for her." As she turned to leave, Damien caught her hand, still gripping the cane. "Chloe Verdier," he whispered, leaning in. "Do you remember our little agreement regarding your cane?" She looked at him sharply. "Unless you're going to give me a new one, please let go of my hand." "Don't worry," he replied calmly. "You'll get it soon." He yanked the cane from her grasp and offered his arm instead. "It would be troublesome if your sister were inebriated and indisposed again, wouldn't it?" he said smoothly. "And this castle is vast. As its master, I shall guide you." After failing to find Alice inside the ballroom, Damien led Chloe outside toward the rose garden. "It seems you've practiced walking on your own quite a bit," he remarked. As they descended the steps, Chloe felt herself waver, certain she might fall. "That must be painful," he added calmly. She tightened her grip on his hand, the only support she had. "No, I'm fine. You're very kind, Your Grace," she replied. Damien smirked. "I see you still have that fighting spirit." Chloe sighed quietly, regretting having let him take her cane. As they walked, his gaze drifted to her hair. "Who put those hair ornaments in for you?" he asked suddenly. Startled by the question, she looked at him. "I did it myself," she answered after a moment. "No wonder it's a mess," he said, his eyes still fixed on her. Chloe felt his gaze pricking her skin. Her face flushed as she asked softly, "Please, return my cane." "Oh, shall I?" he replied lightly. "But we're already here, and I was informed a young woman was spotted in this garden. It might be your sister." Chloe could only pray inwardly that Alice hadn't done anything reckless. As they moved forward, a breathless moan reached their ears, ragged, urgent. Chloe's eyes widened in shock. Two figures came into view, entwined and kissing passionately. And one of them was her sister, Alice. Realizing Chloe was there, Alice tried to push the man clinging to her away, but he didn't budge. "Oh my," Damien muttered under his breath. "What on earth are you doing?" Chloe asked, flustered. At last, Alice shoved the man back. "Go," she urged. "You'll be in danger if they catch you." "I don't care," he replied with a smirk. "Please, Eddie," Alice pleaded. Chloe flinched at the name. She had heard it before. Alice had once told her about a man she met at a village festival, a bohemian she spoke of with a smile. Never in her dreams had Chloe imagined they would meet again like this after the man finally left. Alice ran straight to her sister. "Chloe, Eddie just appeared out of nowhere." "Stop talking, Alice," Chloe said firmly, "and go back to the carriage, now." As Alice dashed back toward the carriage, Damien and Chloe were left standing alone. The air turned awkward, heavy, suffocating. Damien broke the silence first. It seems the younger daughter of House Verdier will be setting tongues wagging yet again, he said coolly. She certainly has a talent for causing scandal whenever she appears in high society. Chloe lowered her head, trembling. I beg you. Please do not speak of this to anyone. But Damien was not easily persuaded. He leaned closer. And why shouldn't I? Then he added calmly, I'm sure you're aware no one would find fault if I were to punish your family for bringing an unauthorized person into my estate. Chloe's hands shook. She knew she had no choice. If she failed to convince him, her family's ruin was certain. She dropped to the ground and bowed deeply. This is my fault for not keeping an eye on her, she said urgently. Please, if you must punish someone, punish me. Damien knelt in front of her instead. And if I agree, he asked with interest, what will you do for me? Chloe looked up at him, her heart racing. She had no time. She needed an answer. 3 years ago, she said after a moment. It was my father who allowed you to use our castle during the war. That is how he contributed to your victory. Damien laughed softly. So you're asking me to repay that debt like this? I only ask that you show our humble family a little generosity, Your Grace, Chloe replied. But haven't I already repaid it? He said, rising to his feet. By inviting the two of you to this ball? His voice hardened. It is your sister you should blame for trampling over that generosity. So now, he added coldly, do you have anything else to say? Desperate, Chloe clung to his feet. If you could please forgive us this once, she pleaded. I will do anything you wish. Damien bent down, lifting her chin. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. The noblewoman who once held her head high, where is she gone? He brushed his fingers along her cheek, clinging to my feet and offering to do anything for me. It doesn't suit you, Lady Chloe. He understood the reason behind her desperation. It was for her sister's marriage. To save their family, one of them had to marry into wealth. A marriage of convenience, he said thoughtfully. And what about your life, Lady Chloe? Do you not care what becomes of it? No, Chloe answered without hesitation. To me, happiness is seeing the people I love well cared for. And you're willing to do anything to achieve that? He asked. If it is within my ability, she replied. Damien narrowed his eyes. Interesting, he murmured. Then I'll have to think about what you might be able to do for me in return. He stroked her cheek once more, then straightened. Now go back to the Verdier estate, immediately. But His Highness said I should introduce Alice to him? Chloe began. Damien's voice cut through her words. Remember this, he said coldly. From this moment on, if you behave in a way that attracts the attention of Johannes or any other man, I will kill you and your family with my own hands. There is a limit to my generosity, he continued. Do you understand? Chloe froze. And one more thing, he added, leaning closer. I suggest you refrain from entering this area with men you do not trust. This garden, he said quietly, is frequented by lovers who come to satisfy their unbridled passions. Unless, he finished, you are hoping for rumors of a scandal between the two of us. With those final words, he turned and left. Chloe remained where she was. He was just as despicable as he had been during their first meeting. Biting her lip, Chloe stared after him, her thoughts bitter, her heart heavy. To His Grace, Chloe wrote a letter addressed to Duke Damien von Thisse. I hope this letter finds you well. 3 months have passed since my return from the city of Swan. There is now talk of marriage between my sister and the gentleman she met at the ball that day. I am well aware that this is the fruit of your Grace's generosity. After writing those words, Chloe paused. Is this a bit excessive? She wondered. When Gilles entered with refreshments, Chloe asked about Alice. She went out this morning and hasn't returned, Gilles replied. She's also been refusing food, saying her stomach feels unwell. Chloe sighed quietly, hoping her sister hadn't gone to meet that bohemian again. Lady Chloe, Gilles said hesitantly, if Lady Alice gets married, you'll become rather lonely. Chloe smiled gently. How could that be, Gilles? She replied. I'll still have you, won't I? Gilles nodded, his face turning slightly red. At that moment, the door opened. Chloe, my dear, Viscount Verdier announced, prepare yourself. Duke Thisse is coming to hunt on our estate. Chloe's hand trembled. Why now? Had he finally decided how she was to repay him? Soon after, Duke Thisse arrived with his attendants. Viscount Verdier stood at the entrance with his daughter to welcome them. Damien surveyed the surroundings and remarked casually, It seems you have fewer servants than before. Caught off guard, Viscount hesitated. The poor harvest had forced them to let many go, but he struggled to explain. Chloe stepped forward smoothly. Unfortunately, we received news of your Grace's arrival rather late, so the castle is still in some disarray. Nonetheless, we shall do our utmost to make your stay comfortable. Damien smiled and stepped closer. Then I shall hold you to your word, my lady. Later, they gathered for dinner. Viscount Verdier apologized for his younger daughter's absence. She has confined herself to her room, feeling indisposed. I hope it's nothing serious, Damien replied with a smile. Then his gaze shifted to Chloe. But what a pity, he added lightly. It seems this course is not to Lady Chloe's liking. Chloe lowered her eyes. I'm afraid it's simply the recent hot weather. I have little appetite. Then, perhaps, Damien suggested, it would do you some good to build more resilience outdoors. Oh, it's not that, Viscount interjected warmly. My daughter loves the forest. She's merely nervous in your Grace's presence. Is that so? Damien replied. Then she must be quite knowledgeable about the terrain. Yes, Viscount said thoughtfully. I recall she only fell ill once after returning from the forest. Come to think of it, it was around the time your Grace was staying here. It was the time of their first meeting. Seeing Chloe pale slightly, Gilles quietly filled her glass with water. Thank you, Gilles, she murmured. From the side, Damien noticed. If she's so fond of the forest, he said calmly, I would like to make a request. He turned to Viscount. That she guide me during tomorrow's hunt. Viscount's expression tightened. I'm afraid, your Grace. Chloe may be a hindrance due to her condition. If you allow, I could find someone else. I'd like to hear what she thinks, Damien cut in. He turned directly to her. Lady. Chloe, will you accompany me? Chloe understood at once. He already knew her answer. If your Grace permits an attendant to lead my horse, she replied carefully, I will be happy to accompany you. Damien smiled brightly. No, Lady Chloe, you shall be riding with me on my horse. After all, he added smoothly, I'm not accustomed to following behind others. And so, Chloe found herself standing at the entrance, prepared for the ride. Damien soon arrived astride his horse. She turned to Gilles. Gilles, will you hold my cane? He accepted it, worry clear on his face. Will you be all right, my lady? Chloe nodded. Behind her, Damien's brows furrowed slightly. As they rode together, Damien spoke casually. It seems you're quite familiar with that attendant of yours. You must be referring to Gilles, Chloe replied. He has been with our family since he was young. When other servants left due to unpaid wages, he chose to remain with us. To our family, Gilles is much more than an attendant. Damien suddenly pulled the reins tight. Hold on, my lady, he said. Then, with a hint of amusement, he asked, Now tell me, which direction? Left or right? Chloe flushed, startled by his closeness. Before she could properly answer, the horse surged forward. The ride left Chloe gasping for breath, clinging tightly, while Damien remained perfectly at ease. Looks like they've caught a deer, he commented lightly. Chloe knew he had done it on purpose. Was this his way of tormenting her? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. This man was a devil. As she struggled to steady her breathing, a large hand suddenly reached from behind, covering her eyes. Breathe, Lady Chloe, Damien said softly. It's all over now. Everything will be all right. His gentle words were completely at odds with his earlier actions. That night at the dinner table, Chloe spoke first. We should call for a physician in the morning, she suggested. Your Grace has been wounded. What happened? Viscount. Verdier asked anxiously. Is your Grace badly hurt? Damien smiled faintly. Hunting on horseback was dull, so I gave chase on foot and was nipped. If it's only a small wound, Chloe should be able to stitch it, Alice said sharply, stabbing her food with her fork. Unfortunately, we don't have any anesthetic, so you'll have to bear the pain. Your Grace, we really should call a physician, Chloe insisted. Alice cut in immediately. Dozens of villagers have fallen ill, and there's only one doctor tending to them. We shouldn't monopolize his time over a minor wound. Damien smiled again. I suppose you're right. He turned to Chloe. Lady Chloe, would you mind taking a look after dinner? Viscount Verdier grew flustered. Your Grace, we shouldn't take this lightly. Please allow me to fetch the physician at once. Damien shook his head. When I was here before, Lady Chloe tended to my soldiers' wounds. I have faith she's excellent at her work. The Viscount beamed with pride. Oh, you remember that? From the corner of his eye, Damien glanced at Chloe. I haven't forgotten a single detail of the events that took place on these grounds, he said calmly. Chloe's face drained of color. What? Does this man truly want from me? Later that night, Chloe arrived at Damien's room with her medical tray. He was seated casually, reading a book. Please show me your wound, Your Grace, she said, standing before him. Why don't you look for it yourself? He replied calmly. I will, but first you must roll up your sleeves, Chloe said, taking a seat. He closed the book and turned to her. I'm sure you're capable of that much, Chloe. With all due respect, Your Grace, she replied steadily, it is not proper for an unmarried woman such as myself to touch a man's body. How old-fashioned, Damien commented. He tossed the book aside and began unbuttoning his shirt. But I suppose you're right. He finished unbuttoning his shirt and shrugged it off with casual ease. Lady Chloe, he added lightly, a teasing curve to his lips. I know it may be difficult to resist, but it would be best if you didn't stare. Chloe flushed instantly. She had never asked him to remove his shirt in the first place. Honestly, the audacity of this man. Calming herself, she stood and began cleaning his wound. "This may be painful," she warned. "No problem," he replied casually. "You may make me suffer as much as you like. Did you learn this from your physician?" "Yes," Chloe said while stitching carefully. "I learned medicine from him. But it's a different pursuit that's coming in handy now." "And what might that be?" he asked. "Embroidery," she replied seriously. Damien laughed. "I never regarded embroidery as a useful pastime." Then, abruptly, he asked, "Does your sister still have secret rendezvous in the dark?" Chloe startled at the sudden change in topic. "No," she replied. "Since that night, she's realized her mistake. Thanks to you, discussions of her marriage to Count Cormier are now underway. I'm very appreciative. Had I known my silence would be repaid with 3 months of silence from you," Damien said, leaning closer. "I would never have done you that favor." "I wrote many letters," Chloe answered hesitantly. "I never received a single one," he said sharply, "because I could never bring myself to send them," she admitted, lightly pushing him back. "And please, Your Grace, you're too close. Don't make excuses," he said quietly. "Tell me the truth, Chloe." She bit her lip, then pushed harder this time. "It's because you despise me. I know how unbearably repulsive you find me, so I hesitated. I didn't know how to repay you." She stood abruptly. "My apologies, but I finished what I came here to do. I should take my leave." In her haste, her cane slipped. The tray fell from her hands, and she lost her balance. Before she could fall, Damien caught her. She landed on the bed with a dull thud, him hovering above her. The air grew hot and heavy. Her eyes drifted to the wound she had just stitched. "Worried it might reopen," she said softly. "Your Grace, your arm. You can always fix it again," his voice came from above. "Can't you?" She clenched her dress nervously. "What is it that you want from me?" she asked. He took a strand of her hair, kissed it lightly, and replied, "I think you already know the answer." Chloe turned her face away. "I am only here to treat your wound, as per my father's instruction." "My dear Lady Chloe," he smiled, "do you truly believe that's what he wants?" It was the same conversation they had shared 3 years ago. "I understand that after living on the battlefield for so long, you doubt people's intentions," Chloe said carefully. "However, to believe that every woman in the kingdom is desperate to marry you," she met his eyes, "is rather an egotistical delusion, is it not, Your Grace?" Damien froze. Then he laughed, loudly. Chloe watched him in silence, wondering if he truly was unhinged. At last he spoke. "Very well. Shall we put your theory to the test?" He sat up, pulling her with him, then released her. "You may go now, Lady Chloe. You've done what you came here to do." Chloe left his room and let out a long breath, finally free from his grasp. Back in her own room, she wondered why she had ever wasted time thinking about such a detestable man, and why she had even prepared those gloves as a gift to thank him. Still, she reminded herself not to let emotion get the better of her. It was because of him that Alice had met Count Cormier. She opened the window, letting a cool breeze flow in. Once Alice is married, she thought, things will stabilize, and everything will be all right. The next morning, Alice paused mid-sip, her teacup hovering in the air. "Chloe?" she asked, utterly surprised. "Are you sure it was his arm that was injured, not his head?" Before Chloe could respond, Viscount Verdier spoke again, visibly unsettled. "Your Grace, I'm not certain I heard you correctly." Damien placed his cup calmly on the table. "I said I wish to propose marriage to your daughter, Lady Alice Verdier." The air froze. "Well, you see," Viscount began awkwardly, "talks of her engagement with Count Cormier are already underway." "That does not change my desire to have her hand in marriage," Damien replied with a polite smile. "And it seems you do not find me an adequate suitor, Lord Verdier." The tension in the hall thickened. No one knew how to react to the Duke's sudden proposal. "That is not the case, Your Grace," Viscount said hastily. "Regardless of my own thoughts, I must respect my daughter's wishes." Damien rose from his seat. "Indeed you must. I will give you 3 days to deliberate," he continued. "In the meantime, I shall stay at my villa on the neighboring estate." He turned toward Chloe, fastening his gloves. "I hope you will give this matter thorough consideration." Then he left. Alice fled to her room, sobbing. "I never asked to become a duchess," she cried. "I know this is a wonderful opportunity for you, but—" "Alice," Chloe said gently, trying to calm her, "if you don't want this, you don't have to go through with it." She didn't understand why the Duke had suddenly proposed. "Is this connected to the test he mentioned last night?" "I'll speak to father," Chloe assured her. Alice clung to her desperately. "What will happen if I refuse the Duke? But don't cry," Chloe said softly. "Everything will be all right," but Alice's heart held something else entirely. "I'm in love with Eddie," she confessed. "Alice, that man is—" Chloe began, but Alice cut her off, her voice breaking. "I'm carrying his child, Chloe." The words struck like lightning. "What can I do?" Alice sobbed. Chloe was utterly stunned. Later, Chloe sat alone in her room. Have we placed too heavy a burden on Alice? Was this the result of our own selfish greed? If this was the truth, then she had no choice. She would stop this marriage, and she would convince her father, no matter the cost. The next day, Chloe sat with her father, determination steady in her eyes. I wish to speak about Alice's marriage, she began. Viscount Verdier sighed heavily. I've been thinking about it as well. A marriage with House Thisse brings both relief and concern. Relief, he continued, because the Duke would never abandon his wife, even if fault were found with your sister. House Thisse understands better than anyone how cruel fate is toward a divorced woman in this kingdom. Father, Chloe interrupted firmly, there is something I must tell you. Before she could say more, the door burst open. Lord Verdier, Lady Chloe. Gilles appeared. Lady Alice has disappeared. He handed them a letter he had found in Alice's room. Viscount snatched it with trembling hands and opened it. To my beloved father and my dear sister, I grew up witnessing the boundless love between father and mother. That is why I can no longer ignore what my heart desires. For the sake of the child I carry, I wish to hold my head high. To prove that, to myself, I will relinquish the name Verdier and live simply as Alice. I apologize, father, for my selfish actions. I hope one day I may make amends. The letter slipped from Viscount's grasp. Unable to bear the shock, he collapsed to the floor. Several hours later, when he regained consciousness, the first thing he asked was, Chloe, did you know? I was only aware of the man, she admitted quietly. The fact that you never mentioned it, Viscount said heavily, means you disapproved of him. Chloe shook her head. If Alice chose him despite my objections, then he must be a worthy man. She took her father's hand. I trust her judgment, father. Then she added gently, as for Duke Thisse, leave him to me. I will speak with him. She rose with a faint smile. Outside the room, Chloe found Gilles waiting. You looked the other way when she left, didn't you? She asked softly. Gilles nodded. I suppose there's no hiding anything from you, he said apologetically. Thank you for being there for her, Chloe replied. I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. That's why I'm grateful you helped her leave. Gilles lowered his head. Lady Chloe, please don't think you must take responsibility for this. If you do, I don't know how I could live with myself. Chloe met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. But I am the only one who can look after this house now, she said, so I will find a way for all of us to survive, even if it means making a dangerous choice. 3 days later, Chloe stood on an outdoor balcony when a man's voice rang. Did you find my offer of marriage so pleasing that you decided to inform me of its acceptance in person? Damien spoke casually as he approached. There was something I needed to discuss, Chloe replied. That is why I came myself. He tilted his head. Are you suffering from some sort of illness? What do you mean? Chloe asked, flustered. If not, Damien continued nonchalantly, seating himself on the sofa, then why don't you come closer and sit beside me? His open shirt did little to conceal his broad chest. Not wishing to argue, Chloe finally sat down next to him. My wound isn't healing, Damien said casually. Have you seen a physician? She asked. No, he replied. Will you apply some of this solution for me? He gestured toward the bottles nearby. Chloe, who had come to refuse his proposal, silently leaned closer. She cleaned the wound and advised him to avoid going out too much in the heat so it could heal properly. But we don't have such pleasant summers in House Thisse, he said lightly. So I want to enjoy it while I can. When she finished, he spoke again. So, why was my proposal rejected? Chloe hesitated, then answered, Marriage is physically infeasible for my sister, Damien laughed. And why is that? Did she suddenly pass away? Chloe clenched her dress. Before I tell you the truth, she said carefully, I want to ask you something. She met his gaze. The reason you wished to marry my sister, was it because of me? He laughed again. Do you remember what you said to me that night? He was referring to when she called him arrogant and delusional for believing every woman wished to marry him. With a smirk, he added, But I would say it is you, Lady Chloe, who is absorbed in delusion, thinking I would marry the indebted daughter of a low-ranking viscount simply to torment her disabled sister. Chloe flinched and turned her face away in embarrassment. You're right. I also think it's unlikely. Sometimes you're amusing, he remarked. Then Chloe asked quietly, Then does that mean you love Alice? Damien sighed. Do I strike you as a romantic who believes marriage is founded on love? Then there can only be one explanation. Chloe said firmly. There must be a pressing reason you need to marry a daughter of House Verdier, one you cannot reveal. Damien nodded slightly. Go on. If there is a rational reason you would reject every other proposal to marry into a low-ranking family, Chloe continued, then it wouldn't matter which daughter you married. She looked at him directly. You might even prefer to wed a woman with a flaw so conspicuous that no one would give her a second glance. Damien smiled and leaned closer. You mean, for instance, a woman who has lost the use of one leg? If I had lost the use of both? Chloe replied flatly. Perhaps I would have made a more perfect bride for you, wouldn't I? Damien leaned closer still. He lifted her chin, and in the next moment, captured her lips. Chloe's eyes widened in shock. The air grew hot as he deepened the kiss, his breath mingling with hers. until she found herself momentarily overwhelmed. Then he pulled back, watching her flustered expression. Chloe shoved him away. "What do you think you're doing? You keep making such remarks," he replied calmly. "I simply wanted to see how sharp that tongue truly is." He pulled her lightly back against him and kissed her neck once before murmuring, "It seems like the perfect opportunity to ask whether you could bear me an heir." Chloe froze, then struck him hard across the cheek. "To behave this way when you have yet to respond to my offer is shockingly disrespectful, Your Grace," she said, breathing hard. Damien turned his head back slowly, licking his lip. "Well," he commented, "that was a fitting response." He rose and began buttoning his shirt. "But I suggest you familiarize yourself with the principles of negotiation again. You may leave, now." A few days later, Chloe sat in the sitting room, unconsciously brushing her fingers against her lips. The memory of that kiss still lingered there. "Are you all right, my lady?" Gilles asked with concern. "You look rather pale." "Yes, I'm fine," Chloe replied firmly. They then spoke about the matter troubling the household. The royal family had continued sending gifts, all meant for Alice, the woman Duke Thisse had proposed to. "The garden is still filled, with wagons carrying presents," Gilles reported. Then, hesitating, he added, "If I may ask, did your conversation with the Duke not go well?" Chloe lowered her gaze. Of course, the conversation had ended bitterly. If her intuition was correct, Prince Johannes was the official heir to the throne. But there was one man whose influence rivaled that of the royal family itself, a man who commanded the people's support, Duke Damien von Thisse. If such a man married the daughter of a low-ranking viscount, the royal family would surely welcome it. Damien knew this as well. So why was he doing this? Before Chloe could think further, a knock sounded at the door. An attendant entered. "A guest has arrived, Lady Chloe." "Who is it?" she asked. "It's Duke Thisse. Shall I inform the master?" Chloe flinched, then stood. "No need. Let father rest. I will prepare myself and meet him." But when she reached her room, she froze. Damien was already inside. "I see you look quite surprised too." "Find me here," he said with a grin. Chloe frowned. "It is improper to enter a lady's room without permission, Your Grace." "I couldn't help myself," he replied as he rose. "I missed you too much. This is a private space," Chloe said firmly. "Let us go to the drawing room." Damien stepped closer, blocking her path. "That won't be necessary, my lady." He toyed with a strand of her hair. "Our relationship will soon be such that privacy between us won't be required." From the side, Gilles stood frozen, stunned by the Duke's behavior. Damien's sharp gaze flicked toward him. "Shut the door and leave." His tone left no room for refusal. Gilles obeyed, his hands trembling as he closed the door, unable to understand why the Duke was behaving like a man who already claimed Lady Chloe as his own. Inside the room, Damien presented a necklace. "These jewels have been passed down through generations of House Thisse," he said calmly. "By tradition, my mother should be the one to give them to you, but she does not fully approve of this match." Chloe nodded. "That is to be expected," she replied evenly. Damien studied her for a moment. "Are you merely pretending to be calm?" he asked, sounding slightly displeased. "Or do you truly feel indifferent?" Chloe met his gaze and asked quietly, "Does this mean you are accepting my offer, Your Grace?" Damien smiled. "Yes." He retrieved the necklace from its box. "Chloe Verdier, consider this a proposal." Then he asked plainly, "Will you be my wife?" Chloe looked at him for a long moment before bowing her head. "I am truly grateful that you have decided to accept my offer." "Grateful?" he echoed. "And how will you prove that?" "I will do my utmost to assist you in every endeavor you undertake," she replied firmly. "And what do you think I want?" he asked, returning the necklace to the box. "What do you believe I seek from you?" Chloe hesitated. "Must I run my tongue across your lips again to make you speak?" he added coolly, lowering her head. She answered, "I believe it is power that you seek, though I am too short-sighted to know your precise intentions." "Chloe," he said sharply, "you are not short-sighted. From now on, you are not to say such things." She flinched, then nodded. "I will do everything within my capacity to assist you. And if, in the future, you wish for a divorce, I will willingly accept it." "You would grant me a divorce?" he scoffed. "How insolent. Your arrogance infuriates me." "I apologize if that is how it sounded," Chloe said quietly. "That was not my intention." "Then what is your intention?" he pressed. "What is it that you want from me?" Clenching her dress, Chloe finally said, I want to be a duchess." Damien stood, retrieved the necklace, and placed it around her neck. Chloe froze, hardly believing what was happening. Leaning in from behind, he whispered, "How does it feel to wear the jewel of House Thisse?" Her neck flushed red. "It feels heavy, Your Grace. This is nothing compared to the responsibility you will bear as a duchess," he replied softly. "Do you still wish to be my wife?" She turned slightly toward him and answered firmly, "I wish for nothing more than that right now." "I see," he murmured, brushing his thumb against her lips. "And have you given further thought to the principles of negotiation?" She nodded slowly. "Then tell me," he said quietly, What do you think I want at this very moment? Realizing there was no escape, Chloe grasped his collar and pulled him close, pressing her lips to his. He stiffened in surprise, then drew her in, deepening the kiss. Chloe closed her eyes, clutching her dress, his presence overwhelming, his tongue tangled with hers, insistent and unyielding, like the snake she had once seen in the forest. At last she released his collar, her face burning. "Is this too much for you?" he asked. Unable to find her voice, she only nodded. He smiled. "You will have to grow accustomed to it. Things will only become more intense from here on, my dear wife-to-be." And in that moment, Chloe understood. She was now bound to this man for the rest of her life. Later, the decision of their marriage was announced to Viscount Verdier. "I expect she will make a fine duchess," Damien said with a bright smile. The Viscount beamed. "Of course she will, I guarantee it. My daughter is a wise young lady," he said proudly. "I'm certain she will win everyone's hearts, if only you can make her happy." Chloe remained silent. Her gaze dropped to the hand holding hers. Damien was wearing the gloves she had prepared for him, the ones she had never gathered the courage to give. When did he find them, she wondered. Damien spoke again. "In that case, Viscount, will you grant me the forest on the Verdier estate, and the mountain path that leads to it?" "The forest?" the Viscount repeated, blinking in surprise. "But the soil is barren, your grace. It cannot be used for much." Still, Damien replied calmly. "It is cherished by Lady Chloe, and it also happens to be where everything began between the two of us." On the day of the wedding, they stood together in the chapel. The bishop's voice echoed solemnly. "Do you swear to stand by your spouse and fulfill your duties through all trials and troubles you may face?" "I do," they answered together. "You may now kiss the bride." Damien leaned closer. Chloe closed her eyes, bracing herself, already familiar with the intensity of his kisses. But instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, pulled her close, and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. Pulling back with a smirk, he asked softly, "What? Were you expecting something else?" Flustered, Chloe avoided his gaze. She couldn't say it aloud, but yes, she had expected more. Viscount Verdier could hardly contain his joy. Behind him, however, Gilles watched with a troubled expression, his eyes lingering on the couple newly declared husband and wife. "Chloe?" Damien called. She looked up, only for him to suddenly wrap an arm around her waist and lift her into his arms. "Please, put me down," she protested, startled by the sudden motion. Damien leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her cheek. "My wife," he murmured, "do you intend to drag this out?" His intention was clear. After a moment's hesitation, Chloe raised her arms and gently clasped them around her husband's neck, as a bride should. "Well done," Damien said quietly. "Chloe von Thisse." A few days later, rumors began to spread throughout the Verdier estate. People whispered endlessly about how Duke Thisse had left immediately after the wedding ceremony, how he had rushed to the capital without even spending the night with his bride. "Does that mean the Duchess has been left alone for 3 whole months?" someone murmured. Gilles heard every word as he waited for Chloe. The entire town buzzed with the same topic, an article published in Red Veil. The article claimed that the newly married Duke had been unable to restrain his fierce passions. It spoke of him being seen in the company of Marchioness Isabella. At the same time, Chloe sat quietly inside a tailor's shop, reading the very same article. "My lady," the shop owner said anxiously upon noticing her expression, "I will burn that paper at once." Chloe shook her head. "That won't be necessary," she replied calmly. "Burning it won't make the truth or the rumors turn to ash." She set the magazine aside and rose after giving her measurements for a dress. The shop owner bowed deeply. "Men and their inability to control themselves will be the ruin of this country," she muttered under her breath. On the way back, Chloe sat in the carriage beside Gilles. He urged her gently. "Please leave everything to me for the time being, my lady. I'll handle all the estate matters. It would be best if you avoid unnecessary attention after that article." But Chloe shook her head. She was not weak enough to abandon her duties as Duchess simply because of rumors. Retreating now would only give them more power. Gilles looked at her with concern. There was little more he could do. Chloe's thoughts drifted back to the day her husband had left. After the wedding ceremony ended, Damien had said that his business there was finished and that he would return to the capital at once. He had advised Chloe to remain behind and perform her ducal duties from the estate. Not once in the past 3 months had he replied to her letters. Could that article be the reason, she wondered? Truthfully, she had never expected anything from this marriage. There was no reason such rumors should affect her. And yet, they left behind an unease she could not quite name. Noticing her troubled expression, Gilles spoke again. "Lady Chloe, there is good news waiting for you at the manor." "Good news?" she asked, startled. "What is it?" "A letter arrived from Lady Alice," he said. "It's short, but it seems she's doing well." At once, the color returned to Chloe's face. If Alice was safe and happy with the man she had chosen, if her father was doing well, if the people of Verdier were in high spirits because their lady had become a duchess, then perhaps that was enough. In truth, she would have preferred to live apart from him anyway, unaware that once she had bound herself to that man, a peaceful life of her own choosing was never truly an option. As I mentioned in my previous letter, all is well at the Verdier estate thanks to you, Your Grace. I hope the business that called you away will soon be settled. I shall write again should anything noteworthy arise. Sincerely, Chloe Verdier. Damien finished reading the letter. A smirk curved his lips. Chloe Verdier, he murmured. Does she not intend to take my name? His gaze drifted to the newspaper lying beside him. The article featured his image alongside Marchioness Isabella, boldly suggesting a rumored affair between them. Chloe must have seen it too, yet she had not mentioned it even once. He wondered what she had felt upon reading it. Did she cry after seeing her husband with another woman? Probably not. She would suppress it, just as she always did, unaware that this very restraint was what irritated him the most. The thought made him laugh softly as he continued reading. The article went on about how Duke Thisse had carried on a secret affair during what should have been his honeymoon period, strengthening Prince Johannes's position. While rumors of the king's failing health continued to circulate, they had reported exactly what he had fed them. His mind returned to Chloe's words. I believe it is power you desire, and I will do my best to assist you in every way. He scoffed. As if she could truly do anything, and yet, whenever he thought of her, an inexplicable urge rose within him, something sharp and restless. From the moment he first saw her tending to wounded soldiers, when she herself looked barely able to stand, that strange feeling had begun, and it only grew stronger each time he saw her. Damien opened a drawer and pulled out a pair of gloves. A sudden thirst stirred. She loved embroidery. Perhaps I should lock her in a room and let her embroider all day, he thought. And if she runs out of fabric, I could even let her embroider my body. The following day, Damien visited the king. The old man lay bedridden, his breathing labored. My days are numbered, the king said weakly. So I trust you will serve Johannes even after I am gone. With a sigh, he added, You are aware he is not of sound mind. Swear before God that you will remain loyal to him. Damien's brow furrowed. I will, he replied coolly, if he is worthy of my loyalty. What did you say? The king demanded, coughing violently. Do not forget, it is your duty to serve the king. Damien's expression hardened. Then the future of this country is clear, he said coldly. It will be ruined by a man who has gone mad, while no one dares to acknowledge it. He paused, then added lightly, Oh, but I take that back. His madness, and the people who died by his hands, have already begun to surface. Rumors of bodies pulled from his chambers are spreading. It won't be long before they are no longer dismissed as rumors. Damien rose to his feet. Your Majesty, I have risked my life on the battlefield for this country, he said firmly, and I will always be ready to fight for it. So it is only right, he continued, that the throne belongs to a man worthy of it. Don't you agree? The king shouted in fury. What do you dare imply? Since when have you harbored such self-serving ambitions? Damien had already turned away, but stopped. He glanced back over his shoulder. Since when? He murmured. Then, facing the king with a confident smile, he answered, Since the day I was born. Meanwhile, Chloe sat on the sofa, her thoughts repeatedly drifting back to the article. She tried, and failed, to distract herself. Just then, Viscount Verdier entered. Chloe, dear, he said gently, a letter has arrived for you, from your grace. She froze. He had not written to her even once since leaving. So why now? She opened the letter. To my beloved wife, Chloe von Thisse. He had deliberately written her name with his. Wait for me at the Thisse estate while carrying out your duties as Duchess. I hope you have been looking forward to our meeting as impatiently as I have. Your husband, Damien Ernst von Thisse, the next day, Viscount Verdier entrusted Gilles with escorting Chloe to the Thisse estate. Gilles bowed and nodded in acknowledgement, but the Viscount's heart was heavy as he prepared to send his daughter away. Noticing his worry, Chloe stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Father, you don't need to worry, she said gently. His Grace cherishes me. I will be all right. Even as she said it, she knew she didn't want to go. But she had no choice. I will be fine, she added with a small smile. So please, send me off with a smile as well. During the journey, Chloe sat quietly in the train coach, while Gilles spoke with some embarrassment. Lady Chloe, I would have been perfectly fine riding in the freight car. This feels far too extravagant for me. Chloe smiled softly. We have 2 long days of travel ahead, and soon I'll be spending much of my time alone. Along the way, they watched the snow slowly melting, a sign that spring would soon arrive. After the long journey, they finally reached the birch castle of House Thisse. A single head maid arrived to welcome them. I am Eliza, she introduced herself, bowing. The castle was vast, yet only one person had come to greet Chloe. It was clear enough, she was not particularly welcome. Setting that aside, Chloe requested politely, Please prepare food for Gilles for his return journey. The maid glanced at her irritably. I've already assigned that task to a maidservant. She then turned sharply. Please follow me. Chloe turned back to Gilles. I'm sorry, I won't be able to see you off. Have a safe journey home, Gilles. As she followed the head maid, limping slightly, Gilles watched her with deep concern until she disappeared from sight. Inside, Chloe bowed respectfully. My name is Chloe. It is an honor to finally meet you. Raise your head, a woman ordered. Chloe hesitated, then lifted her gaze. You're quite a pretty one, the woman said calmly. Damien's mother, you remind me of the very first deer Damien ever hunted. Chloe let out a hesitant laugh. That comparison was unexpected. Are you secretly acquainted with death? Lady Thisse asked, stepping closer. Or perhaps knowledgeable about the skeletons hidden in the royal family's closet? Nothing of the sort, Your Grace, Chloe replied quickly. Then that means he chose you for reasons beyond mere practicality, Lady Thisse said, brushing Chloe's hair aside. I see you're beautiful, but hunting a deer with an injured leg is rather unusual for my son. When he asked me for the family jewels, I could hardly believe my ears. She waved her hand dismissively, then lifted Chloe's chin. Or perhaps it was simply curiosity. He does enjoy a thrill now and then. I'm not certain why he chose me, Chloe said firmly, but I intend to serve him to the best of my ability, despite my shortcomings. You're brighter than I expected, Lady Thisse replied, and quite pretty. My jewels will suit you well. You're clever too. You'll be of great help to me in this castle. Then, smiling brightly, she added, Now that you're here, how about I tell you what Damien was like as a child? Later that night, Chloe finally lay down on her bed. Damien's mother had spent hours proudly boasting about her son. Like mother, like son, Chloe thought. Arrogant as he was, one thing was clear. He had been deeply adored as a child. Exhausted, she turned onto her side. That was when she noticed a framed portrait of her husband beside the bed. It was almost as if he were there. Chloe sighed. He even placed a portrait of himself in his wife's bedchamber. Soon enough, her thoughts faded, and sleep finally claimed her. I was surprised you shut yourself away in the study for 3 days right after arriving, Lady Thisse said lightly. Then she chuckled. I see now, you're quite like Damien. Once he focuses on something, he barely notices the sun rising. She set her cup down and asked calmly, So, what was it you wished to discuss? Chloe hesitated, then spoke carefully. Eliza, would you mind giving us some privacy? Eliza's expression hardened at once, but Lady Thisse waved a hand dismissively. There's no need. Eliza has served this household since the day Damien was born. I consider her family. Chloe's expression tightened. She recalled the letter that had arrived from her husband. To my dear Duchess. How are you finding life at Birch Castle? I trust you are performing your duties satisfactorily, and I hope you will not disappoint me. Missing you very much, Damien. To Chloe, it felt less like a letter, and more like a warning. Still, she was a duchess now. She had to fulfill her duty. After 3 days of reviewing the ledgers, she finally spoke. After examining the accounts, Chloe began. I discovered several discrepancies in the castle's finances. Lady Thisse slowly placed her teacup down. My dear, she said coolly, overseeing a castle of this size is no simple task. Yes, Chloe replied, but the records don't clearly show where the funds are being spent. Chloe continued steadily. The tax amounts collected from the people do not add up. There is also a discrepancy between the number of wine bottles recorded in the cellar and those listed in the ledgers. This isn't an isolated incident, Chloe added. These irregularities appear repeatedly. She paused, and they began around the time Eliza assumed the role of steward. Chloe's gaze shifted toward Eliza. Eliza trembled. Never, in her dreams, had she imagined being exposed by a woman who had arrived only 3 days ago as Eliza began to sob. Lady Thisse reached out and grasped her arm. Please leave us for a moment, she ordered. Once Eliza left, Lady Thisse stood abruptly. Why didn't you warn me this was about Eliza? She demanded. We could have discussed this privately. I apologize, Your Grace, Chloe replied evenly. But Eliza is not the only one involved. We must also dismiss the stablemaster, Robinson. Lady Thisse frowned. The stablemaster? What does he have to do with this? To smuggle goods on this scale, Chloe explained. Eliza could not have acted alone. Wagons would have been necessary. Lady Thisse sighed heavily. Those two are loyal servants who supported me during difficult times, she said. Their dismissal is not something to be taken lightly. Chloe lifted her gaze. That is precisely why their dishonesty cannot be forgiven, ma'am, she said firmly. If we overlook this, the crack will only widen. If you turn a blind eye, their transgressions will grow worse. Lady Thisse's expression cracked. Chloe, she snapped. Why do you insist on making everything so difficult? And why do you keep calling me ma'am as though we were strangers? Chloe hesitated, then asked softly. Then, would you permit me to call you mother? That wouldn't be appropriate, either, Lady Thisse scoffed. She stood. This conversation is over. I will discuss this with Damien when he returns and make a decision then. And I have no appetite, she added sharply. You may eat lunch by yourself. Then, shall I bring your meal to your room? Chloe asked. No, Lady Thisse replied curtly. I understand you don't want my company, Chloe began, but skipping meals is harmful for— Enough, Lady Thisse shouted. Must you respond to everything I say? You really are quite exasperating. With that, she brushed past her, leaving Chloe alone in the room. Lunch was served to Chloe, yet no one stayed to accompany her. Even the maid left, quietly closing the door behind her. Only then did Chloe realize how deeply she had made herself disliked. She had overheard whispers, how the lady who had arrived only days ago dared to dismiss a long-serving maid, and how important it was to be prudent when choosing a bride. Her appetite vanished. She missed her father. How is he doing? Did Gilles return safely? Has another letter arrived from Alice? And when will the Duke return? But even if he did, would anything truly change? She remembered his words, perform your duties as Duchess. Chloe let out a quiet sigh and shook her head. Of course not. Driving people into a corner seemed to be a tradition of House Thisse. She stabbed her fork into the food and muttered under her breath, I don't know who's worse, the mother or the son. You seem to be having a pleasant conversation with yourself. A man's voice sounded behind her. Chloe looked up to see Damien standing there smiling down at her. I must have made you very lonely while I was gone, he added with a smirk. Chloe immediately stood. Your Grace. Before she could finish, Lady Thisse rushed in. Damien, my dear son, she exclaimed, embracing him with a radiant smile. Why didn't you say you were coming? I returned because I missed you, Mother, he replied easily. Chloe stood quietly to the side, witnessing the warmth between mother and son. Then Damien's gaze shifted to her. Rushing here made me hungry, he said. I think I'll have something to eat. Of course, Lady Thisse said brightly. I'll have something prepared at once. No need, Damien replied, turning toward the table. There's plenty here. I'll have that. They sat down. Did you find your stay pleasant while I was away, Chloe? He asked casually. Of course, Chloe replied calmly. Everyone has been very kind to me. That's good to hear, Damien said, taking a bite. The next second, he spat it out. Call the chef at once, he ordered coldly. Moments later, the head chef hurried in. How did leftovers meant for the poorhouse end up on the table of House Thisse's? Damien demanded. The poorhouse? The chef murmured, clearly startled. It seems those assigned to set the table must have made a mistake. Who committed such a grave mistake? Damien asked. His voice was so dangerous that the servant responsible immediately fell to their knees, begging for forgiveness. How dare you ask for forgiveness after insulting my family? Damien scoffed. Chloe spoke hurriedly. Your Grace, she said firmly, it is only one meal. Please forgive them. Damien smiled faintly. My wife, this food was meant for the poorhouse. Sitting here and consuming such scraps is an insult to my name. You may come from a humble family, he continued, but even that much should be common sense. Chloe met his gaze. My apologies, Your Grace, she said calmly, but the food is still fit for human consumption. As your wife, and as the lady of this house, she added steadily, I ask that you restrain yourself, show them mercy, and grant them the chance to serve a proper meal befitting House Thisse. That night, Chloe finally sat down on her bed. Thanks to her intervention at lunch, the servants had been spared. I suppose I should be generous if that is what my wife wants, Damien had said, granting her request. Only then had Chloe allowed herself a quiet sigh of relief. At least no heads had rolled. But her peace was short-lived. A maid soon appeared at the door. His Grace wishes to see you in his chamber. Chloe straightened at once. At this hour? What could he possibly want? Please inform His Grace that I will come as soon as I am ready, she replied carefully. Before the maid could leave, the door opened again. Damien himself stepped inside. As soon as you're ready? He repeated lazily. What preparations could you possibly need? Chloe stiffened and instinctively pulled her nightgown closer around herself. There's no need for decorum at this hour, he added coolly. Don't you agree, my wife? He stood on the edge of her bed without invitation. Chloe turned her face away. I will come to your chamber once I am dressed, she said firmly. Please give me a few moments. Damien merely leaned back, unbothered. I said there's no need, he replied with a smirk. You can come as you are. Chloe frowned but steadied herself. With the help of her cane, she carefully got down from the bed. Are you unable to move without that? He asked casually. It's not easy, she snapped. Would you prefer to see me fall to the floor? That would be rather adorable, he answered without shame. Ignoring him, Chloe draped a shawl over herself. Damien extended his hand. Shall we go to my room, my wife? They soon arrived in Damien's chamber. It's late, Chloe said cautiously. What urgent matter did you wish to discuss? He laughed softly. What business do you think there could be between a husband and wife at this hour? Chloe froze. Her thoughts raced. Was he referring to what they had left undone on their wedding night? Heat rushed to her face, embarrassment flooding her. Damien's smirk deepened. He clearly knew exactly what she was thinking. I intend to reward you, he said lightly, for performing your duties as Duchess, by dealing with Eliza and Robinson. Chloe looked at him in surprise. So, you already knew about their dishonesty? How could I not? he replied with a shrug. I simply turned a blind eye because of my affection for my mother. He stood and walked toward the window. She's far too attached, he continued. She'll be staying at our southern villa for a while. Fresh air will do her good. Then, glancing back at Chloe, he added, It should also make things easier for you here. He retrieved a carefully wrapped box from the side table and returned to her. Open it, he said. Chloe reached out and opened the box. Her eyes widened at what lay inside. I thought I'd give you something more practical, Damien said calmly. You seem to have a habit of losing your cane. It was a brace. Once you get used to it, he continued, you'll be able to walk comfortably without support. He looked at her expectantly. Now try it on so I can see. Chloe stared at it for a moment, then closed the box. Thank you for the gift, she said evenly. But whether I use it or not is at the discretion of the recipient. I'll try it another time. In truth, she didn't know how to use it. And she didn't want to be seen stumbling, especially not in front of him. She knew he would mock her. Then I suppose inviting your servant into your quarters was also at your discretion, Damien said coolly. Chloe's eyes widened in shock. Did you have someone follow us? When you belong to house this, he said coldly, there are always eyes on you. His gaze sharpened. So tell me, why show such generosity to a servant and bring him to my estate? To Chloe, the answer was simple. Gilles had been with her family since childhood. He was more family than servant, but Damien's words echoed in her mind. Eliza had served his family since birth, and yet she betrayed them. Chloe let out a quiet sigh. Please, she said softly. I ask you not to insult me. I'm not insulting you, Damien replied. I'm reminding you. He leaned closer. Your faithful servant has not yet left the Thisse station. If people discover he lingered here out of attachment to his mistress, what do you suppose they'll whisper behind your back? Gilles hadn't returned? Why? Chloe couldn't make sense of it, until Damien's voice cut in again. I believe you will not abandon your duties and bring shame upon me, he said coldly. So, Chloe von Thisse, put the brace on. Her fingers clenched in the fabric of her dress. She had no choice. At last, she put it on and tried to walk, only to collapse to the floor the very next moment. Damien knelt beside her at once. What part is uncomfortable? He asked, reaching out to inspect it. Chloe grabbed his hand sharply. Don't. Then answer me, he said firmly. I need to know how to fix it. The whole thing is uncomfortable, she cried, frustration spilling over. I don't need it. It only causes me pain. It will ease with time, Damien replied evenly. Endure it. He brushed his fingers near her eyes. Are you crying? Chloe turned her face away. No, why would I? Damien smiled faintly. Of course. Crying like a child would be unbecoming of a duchess. He slid his hand beneath the hem of her dress to adjust the brace. Your Grace, Chloe whispered. Her breath hitched at the sensation. You truly are a devil, she said through clenched teeth. Damien lifted her chin, a dangerous glint in his eyes. My dear wife, he murmured with a smirk. I've yet to show you just how much of a devil I can be. He tightened his grip on her thigh. Feeling her flinch, he asked quietly, What do you feel right now? Resentment, Chloe answered after a moment. I don't believe you, he said, pulling her leg closer. He leaned in until their chests were nearly touching. Let me ask you again, he insisted. How do you feel? Chloe's heart raced at the closeness. She clenched the fabric of her dress. My heart is beating painfully fast, she admitted. His hand slipped into the brace, loosening it as he spoke. Is your whole body burning like an ember? He murmured. Does your blood rush so fiercely you can barely control your breathing? Slowly, he removed the brace from her leg. Tell me, Chloe, he continued softly. Does your heart feel as though it might burst from your chest? Her face reddened. Every word he spoke was true, and that was precisely why resentment filled her, because every sense was being overwhelmed by the man looming over her, as though he intended to consume her whole. When their lips met, Chloe closed her eyes, as if surrendering to the devil before her. After a long moment, he pulled back, gently stroking her hair. Tell me, he asked, how does it feel to kiss the man you compared to the devil? Her heart still raced, but she couldn't allow herself to be swept away like this. Please, she whispered, allow me to return to my bedchamber. He remained silent, gazing at her for a moment. Then he spoke calmly. I suppose I must oblige, if that is what my wife wishes. He lifted her carefully, and soon after, Chloe was returned to her room. The next day, Duke Damien sat at the dining table with several members of the royal court, Chloe seated beside him. The nobles praised him generously, calling him a devoted husband, admiring how swiftly he had married and settled his household. Before Chloe could grow comfortable, the topic shifted. Reports had arrived of unusual movements in the neighboring duchy, signs that suggested preparations for war. The court agreed they could no longer ignore it and pressed the Duke to reach a decision. Damien listened silently. Then his gaze fell on his wife. I would like to hear what my wife thinks, he said calmly. Chloe flinched. She could feel every pair of eyes turned toward her. Don't know much, she began carefully, but I do know that the people of Swanton are tired of war. Damien tilted his head. Perhaps, he replied, but conquering the duchy would ultimately benefit our people. Yes, Chloe answered steadily, but no one can guarantee victory. We also cannot assume the duchy will remain weak. It is perfectly capable of using its geographic advantage. A murmur spread through the room. No one had expected such a measured response from the Duchess. Several nobles praised her insight, but Damien was not finished. So, he continued smoothly, do you suggest we simply wait while their power grows? They've already begun raising tariffs on goods imported from Swanton. What would you do about that? Once again, Chloe felt every gaze upon her. More precisely, she sensed they had been waiting all along, eager for her to falter. Is he doing this to humiliate me? The thought crossed her mind, but she refused to retreat. The most effective way to prevent war, Chloe said firmly, is to sign a peace treaty, one that avoids bloodshed through diplomacy. Promises can be broken, Damien countered coolly. A few nobles smirked. Then we must ensure they cannot violate it, Chloe replied without hesitation. There are many approaches, but the most effective is to form an alliance through marriage. A marriage alliance is effective, Damien said. However, the duchy has 1 prince and 3 princesses, while Swanton has only Prince Johannes. A ripple of laughter passed through the table. Everyone knew Prince Johannes's reputation. To Chloe, unaware of the full extent of his infamy, it felt as though they were laughing at her suggestion itself. Being wed to Prince Johannes is simply too dreadful to imagine, one noble scoffed. It seems her ladyship hasn't been keeping up with the Red Veil. The mention of the magazine drew knowing smiles. Damien laughed lightly. Well, now I'm curious myself. Has my wife ever read the Red Veil? He turned his gaze to Chloe. But judging from your expression, it seems you have. Only by chance, Chloe replied calmly, and I don't concern myself with such cheap tabloids. She rose from her seat. Please excuse me, she said evenly. I'll ask for dessert. Do continue your discussion. With that, she left the table. As she walked away, one thought echoed bitterly in her mind. He's worse than I imagined. That night, when the entire estate had fallen silent, a loud bang echoed outside Chloe's room. Startled, she hurried to open the door. Eliza stood there breathless and crying. Before Chloe could ask anything, a maid rushed over in panic. Miss Eliza, you mustn't be seen here. If His Grace finds out... Eliza shook her off desperately. Please, let go of me. I worked so hard to stay here. Chloe looked at her steadily. Calm down, Eliza, she said gently. And tell me why you're here. With a broken voice, Eliza sobbed. It's my grandson. He's sick. He keeps losing consciousness. Please, Your Grace, allow me to see the family physician. At her words, Chloe's expression softened. She remembered being in that same condition as a child. Call the physician at once, Chloe ordered. The maid hesitated, clearly worried about the Duke, but this time the Duchess did not waver. Go, now. As the maid ran off, Chloe closed the door and turned back to Eliza. Lead the way, she said firmly. Fever doesn't wait. When they reached Eliza's house, Chloe quickly removed the boy's outer clothing. The child complained weakly that he felt cold. He says he's cold. What are you doing? Eliza cried in panic. Ignoring the fear, Chloe spoke calmly. Go outside and bring snow. We need to lower his fever. Eliza froze. If anything happens to him, I'll never forgive you. You can resent me later, Chloe replied steadily. But if you don't want him to end up like me, you must trust me now. She administered the medicine carefully. After some time, the boy's fever finally broke. The physician arrived shortly after and turned to Eliza. I was late. If not for the Duchess acting so quickly, the child would not have survived. Eliza collapsed in tears. How can I ever repay you? There's no need, Chloe said softly. I'm just glad he's safe. At that moment, the door opened. Chloe. Everyone flinched. The Duke had arrived. Damien ignored everyone else, his gaze fixed solely on her. Come outside, he ordered. As they walked, Chloe explained everything. Eliza was meant to leave 2 days ago, but her grandson fell ill. The money she stole ended up in her son's hands. He fled to the capital to gamble. She continued quietly. The child is innocent. Adults are the ones who sinned. And Eliza devoted her life to house this. She can be considered family. We couldn't just abandon her. Damien listened in silence. I apologize for calling the physician without your permission, Chloe added hesitantly, but it was urgent. He stopped. Chloe, she fell silent. I never asked you to explain yourself, he said calmly. I only want to know why you chose to help her, and I'm told you even wrote her a letter of recommendation. She needed it, Chloe answered without hesitation. After working her entire life at Birch Castle, she would never find proper work without help. And I called the physician because it was necessary. Was it pity? Damien asked. Or guilt? No, Chloe replied firmly. You always act with a reason, Your Grace. Yes. Almost always, he answered. Well, I'm different, Chloe said, a slight pout forming. Then tell me, he asked quietly. What do you do instead of asking questions when you wish to become closer acquainted with someone? She sighed. I simply get to know people naturally. When you quietly observe someone, you learn things about them, without interrogating them. Damien noticed her hands, reddened from the cold. Without a word, he removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. I'm thinking of giving you another gift, Chloe, he said. She looked up in surprise. I'm considering hiring Gilles Watteau for the vacant position of stablemaster. It seems he's been living poorly, working at the train station instead of returning to the Verdier estate. What do you think? Chloe's face brightened instantly. He's trustworthy, she said eagerly. I can vouch for him, Your Grace. Then she added quickly, and I swear, nothing improper has ever occurred between us. Damien listened quietly. Then he leaned closer, a trace of mischief in his eyes. In that case, Chloe, he said softly, kiss me. Then I will gladly employ him. But Gilles' a free man, Chloe replied firmly. He may work wherever he wishes. Damien smirked. Then it seems the poor boy may soon find himself unwelcome in this. He stepped closer. You see, I am a devoted husband. The less confidence my wife has in me, the fewer places he'll find himself accepted within my domain. Chloe exhaled sharply. How unfortunate for the kingdom, she murmured. Then, lifting her chin, she spoke calmly. Lower your head. Amused, Damien complied, only to be seized by the collar in the next instant. Chloe pulled him down and pressed her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his arms wrapped around her, returning the kiss with fierce intensity. When their lips finally parted, he spoke low and slow. A commendable effort, he said. Though unfortunate that it was done for another man's sake. His gaze darkened. It pleases me. And insults me at the same time. Still, he kept his word. Gilles was appointed stablemaster, and Chloe felt a quiet relief as she wrote to her father, informing him that Gilles was doing well at the Thisse estate. That night, Chloe was summoned again. This time, Damien led her not to his chamber, but to the billiard table. Play with me, he said casually. Chloe tilted her head. I don't play without gain. He laughed. Then what do you want? If I win, she said, chalking the cue, you will stop summoning me to your chamber late at night. Very well, Damien replied easily. But if I win, I will take something of yours that I want. The game began. As Chloe focused on her shot, Damien spoke lightly. You do know the essence of this game is deception, don't you? Do as you please, she replied coolly. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, in 2 days, guests will arrive at Birch Castle. I expect you to welcome them as Duchess. He leaned closer, voice dropping. And one more thing. Marchioness Isabella will be among them. Chloe's hand faltered. She's rather particular, he continued softly. I suggest you take extra care with the preparations. Her cue slipped. The ball missed its mark. It appears you've lost, Chloe, Damien said with a satisfied smile. The name alone had been enough. Now, he added smoothly, it's time for you to give me what I want. And what would that be, she asked, resigned. Your lips, he replied, fingers brushing her hair. A sincere request, of course. She met his gaze. Is it? Of course, he said lightly. And don't forget, you proposed the wager. What he truly wanted, though, was to see her break, to see the restraint she clung to finally shatter. Chloe stepped closer. Your Grace, she said quietly. Never have I felt such contempt for another person. Then she kissed him. When she pulled away, she whispered, If there's nothing else, may I take my leave? The door closed behind her. Damien leaned back against the table, exhaling sharply. A bitter scoff escaped his lips. He had gravely underestimated just how capable his wife was of driving him mad. A few days later, Chloe sat in the center, welcoming each noble lady one by one. At last, she turned to the final guest seated beside her. Welcome, Lady Isabella, Chloe said calmly. Isabella bowed slightly. Thank you. I was worried my presence here might upset you. Chloe's expression did not waver. You are a close friend of His Grace, she replied evenly. Why would I be upset? Isabella flinched, then her eyes welled with tears. Oh, I didn't mean it that way, she sobbed. Chloe immediately understood. She was doing this on purpose, and yet, here Isabella was, acting like the wronged one. If you're feeling unwell, Chloe said smoothly, I can have a room prepared for you to rest. At that, Isabella's crying grew louder. I knew it, she said between sobs. My presence was never welcome here. Murmurs spread among the noble women. Some whispered about how cold the Duchess's suggestions sounded. Just then, a familiar voice rang out behind Chloe. What is going on here? Damien had arrived. Chloe turned slightly. Lady Isabella mentioned she wasn't feeling well, she explained, so I suggested she rest inside the castle. Isabella stiffened, sensing her plan slipping away. She turned dramatically and said, I should never have come. I knew how widows are regarded in this country. Instantly, sympathy bloomed around her. Damien stepped forward. Shall I have a carriage prepared for you? He asked. Chloe's gaze sharpened. She couldn't allow this to go any further. Rising with quiet authority, she spoke clearly. If I felt uneasy because of you, Lady Isabella, I would never have sent an invitation. The room fell silent. I merely suggested you rest, Chloe continued. But if you're feeling well, you're more than welcome to remain with us. The choice is entirely yours, just as it is for everyone here. Isabella hesitated. Then, forcing a smile, she said, I'm feeling much better now. The other ladies quickly followed, murmuring praise about the gathering, clearly unwilling to appear discourteous before the Duchess. Thank you for your understanding, Chloe said. Pudding will be served shortly. I hope you enjoy it. She turned to leave. Oh, Damien said casually, stopping her. That happens to be Isabella's favorite dessert. Thank you for the hospitality, my wife. Chloe paused. Then she turned back slowly, smiling. You're most welcome. She walked away without another glance. Behind her, Damien watched closely, searching her face, her posture, any crack he might enjoy. Further back, Isabella dabbed her eyes. A dangerous glint flickered in her gaze. That woman, she wasn't someone to be taken lightly. And yet, why was she even comparing herself to her? No matter what, Isabella was certain of one thing. She would never allow herself to be deprived of what she believed was hers. Later, as the others glided across the ice, Damien pushed Chloe forward in a skating wheelchair. What pleasant weather, he remarked casually. Are you enjoying yourself among the ladies? Yes, Chloe replied with a quiet sigh. Everything went smoothly, thanks to you. And besides, I was merely doing my duty as Duchess. Damien glanced at her, amused. Chloe, he asked suddenly, do you resent me? She flinched at the unexpected question, then answered calmly, even if I did, I wouldn't be foolish enough to admit it out loud. He tilted his head. Why not? Chloe leaned back slightly. Because at the moment, my life is in your hands, she said dryly, and I'd rather not be stranded in the middle of a frozen lake after offending you. Damien burst into laughter. No one amuses me like you, he murmured. Just then, a nobleman called him aside. Your Grace, my apologies if my wife showed any disrespect earlier to the Duchess. Damien barely looked at him. His gaze was fixed on Chloe, waiting quietly nearby. He wanted to know what went on inside her mind. If he learned everything about her, would it finally ease this relentless pull? A strange thought crossed his mind. Do I want this woman's love? The idea startled him. Have I gone mad? He muttered under his breath. Then he turned sharply to the man before him. Lord Spencer, Damien said coolly, leaning down to meet his eyes. If you seek forgiveness, ask it directly from my wife. He straightened. And if you're finished, I must return to her. He turned away. Lady Thisse, she's in danger. Damien froze. On the other side of the lake, Chloe's wheelchair suddenly tipped. She hit the ice hard as the chair overturned. A sharp crack echoed. Chloe tried to rise, but without her cane she couldn't stand. The crack spread. Then, with a deafening sound, the ice gave way. Chloe plunged into the freezing water below. Chloe! She heard Damien's voice calling her, but soon, everything went silent. The cold swallowed her senses, numbing her body. Is this how I die, she wondered? If this was the end, she wanted to see them one last time. Her father, Alice, Gilles. Their faces passed through her fading thoughts. And then, she saw him, her husband, Damien von Thisse, calling her name softly. Perhaps, she thought as darkness closed in, before I die, I wanted to see him too. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.